In this video, we're going to be talking about how a congregation of simple things give miraculous results. For example, when a thing is infinitely greater than the sum of its parts. The first one, if you look at it, we have inert, dead, organic compounds. They're everywhere. They could be on the ground. They're completely dead and inert. How do they congregate in such a way that gives rise to a self-replicating thing with its own motive? A living organism, which is what DNA is. That is a miracle. And when I say miracle, I don't really mean that in the religious context. I mean that it's an event that is quite remarkable and quite rare. When you look at what DNA then does, if you look at it, the genes inside it combine to code for proteins. And the proteins then form enzymes, which are machines, living organic machines. So we have a thing that is infinitely greater than the sum of its parts. The point I'm making here is that this is the path of evolution that you have followed. And it's like layers of onions, complex to become you. Humanity is the new form of DNA. Not humans, humanity. As our collective existence on planet Earth, we have become a new organism. And it's a new form of DNA because it follows the exact same pattern. The reason why it follows the same pattern is because the universe is fractal. So you're just going to get the same patterns repeating itself. No matter where you look, everything repeats in the same sort of patterns like layers on onions. So enzymes, organelles, cells, components, the nucleus, etc. make up a cell. Now this, again, as a congregation, is infinitely greater than the sum of its parts. Because if you take a single part and put it anywhere you like, it's useless. It's going to die. But as a unit, it's a self-sufficient living organism, if you like, and again infinitely greater than the sum of its parts. Cells congregate to make organs. Now there are trillions of cells in here, but any particular cell on its own would be infinitely more reduced. I mean, like an amoeba. Compare that to a human being or to a deer or to an elephant. There is no comparison in terms of complexity. So you have here another congregation of, again, simple things which gives rise to an overall thing that is greater than the sum of its parts again. And if you keep going, organs then form bodies, and if you look at it, we are the result of the congregations of the layers that I've just mentioned. And look at what we can do. We can actually repair these things. We are almost becoming, I don't like to say the word God because it's a silly word that implies a lot of religious context, but in terms of becoming in charge of our own destiny, if you like, you can see how amazing the human organism is in terms of what it can do, in terms of what it means relative to everything else in the universe. Now, what would be the point of having a liver just sitting there on its own? Absolutely nothing. So once again, we have a thing here that is infinitely greater than the sum of its parts. And the reason I've followed this is that the next stage is humanity, because you've seen, hopefully, if you followed any of the other videos before, you'll see that we are genetically orphans. Our genes, our natural genes in DNA have let us down. We can neither run fast, no claws, no teeth, etc., etc. We can't fly, we can't breathe in the water, and all of the other problems that we face. But cerebral genes, and again, there was a video before this, and please see if that means nothing to you, are real genes. This is not a metaphor. So our thoughts, which are then become our culture, collectively, enable us to become a tiger, to run faster than a cheetah, to swim under the breathe and swim underwater, and to fly, either paragliding or in a jet, etc. So my point here is that none of this belongs to you or me as an individual. It belongs to humanity, like a body, and we can only access it if we ride within that body, like we saw before, cells within organs, organs within bodies, and so on. So it is humanity, the new organism, that possesses all this power, and we are nothing but cells within that unit. So look at how we have followed the path and how we have got here. The birth of a conscious earth whether you like it or not, the Earth, I think the Earth is just a molecule. If you follow the physics side of things, you'll see that the Earth is nothing big other than a big hydrogen atom, and we are very much a part of this molecule. So we are inherently connected to it, and its well-being depends on our well-being, and so on and so forth. But and in any case, the future of DNA has gone away from, and you'll see in a minute when we go to the next video, which is evolution by invitation, is that there is no more nature. We have, since we have been here, and for quite some time, nature has not existed. The evolution is now subject to conscious selection, not irresistible selection through mutations in the DNA, because that's just way too small. Our effect on the Earth is infinitely greater and faster than the mutations can cope with. So whether we like it or not, this is who we are. We're a conscious being that, as humanity, not as humans, so let's not make that mistake. As a human, as an individual, you and I are useless. We are only who we are and what we can do because we're part of humanity, and we share that culture because that is the collective memories or the genes of the conscious being that we call humans. It's no wonder then that Nietzsche considers us to be gods, as collectively he considers the humanity to be the god Dionysus. And no wonder that Socrates thinks we are also amazing, that we are not animals, that we're not accelerated animals, that we are humans, and as humans we are Apollon, if you like, the god of prophecy here. You'll see why these two become important later when we actually discuss philosophy on its own, and why they actually converge at one point. But the point I'm making is that they both could see the amazing potential that humans have, rather than everything else that's around us, but yet we don't seem to be able to see it. So why do we have elitism and humanity? Why do we have it? If we maybe you can say, well, we don't understand it, but if you look at the path of how we've got here, it's almost entirely based on a congregation where the result is infinitely greater than the sum of its parts. So why, when humanity is what it is, and why, when we derive so much advantage from humanity, the overall accumulation of cerebral genes or thoughts that have made it possible who we are in terms of our technology, why do we insist on having labels? Why do we insist on being segregated? Why do we want to be, if you like, lumps of cancer within this great humanity body, like ethnic labels? The Aborigine or Red Indian or Chinese or all of these other meaningless labels that in the context of evolution has no meaning at all. Because if you look at genes, if you look at everything else, those are choices that we make. They are not inevitable. They are not something that are dictated by our genes or by nature itself. We have religious labels to segregate us, to make us different, Muslims, Jews, Christians, etc. And we have geographical labels where we draw arbitrary lines on planet Earth, and that becomes our little domain, and we feel we can do whatever we like, and then we set against each other in perpetual competition and destruction. We have intellectual labels where we define ourselves by different mindsets, or pretend at least anyway, because ultimately, when you think about it, Nietzsche's absolutely right. Everybody wants to have power, and so they use different nonsense to justify how they get it, whether it's religion, whether it's intellect, or whether it's a means of congregation or political system. But ultimately, everybody wants to be in charge of making decisions. So why do we need these labels? And all of these bloody labels are racism, because racism is just another form of elitism. So when we divide ourselves, like, why do African Americans insist on being called African American? Why do they have to have a different culture? Why do they have to dress differently, speak differently, and do all sorts of things completely differently, and yet at the same time want to be equals? You can't be different and you can't be equal at the same time. My point is not just the African Americans, it's everywhere. Everybody wants to have to belong in a particular group, like a lump of cancer, and be an elite group. And all of these labels are all gravitational and cancerous, because by definition, if you belong to this group, then everyone that doesn't belong to this group is against that group. You set it yourself, because patriotism is the worst form of loving your people, because you just set everybody else against them that are not part of that group. And so why do we do this? Why do we insist on having cancer if the path is this? If we have come that way from cells and congregations, and where the sum, where the resulting unit or event is infinitely greater than the sum of its parts, this way of evolution, why do we insist on going that way? Because that's exactly what we're doing. If you look at the way we educate our children or educate ourselves, is that we insist on individuality. The idea of cooperation, the idea of coexistence is seen as naive and stupid, because that means you have no ambition if you want to be part of the herd almost. So be an individual, win at all cost, hoard as much as you can, and exploit everyone else, because how else would you hoard? How else would you win if someone else doesn't lose? So by definition, we set ourselves quite deliberately to go against the evolutionary path that has brought us here. So we want to be a cell, which is basically, that's how cancer, materializes. A cell that goes bananas and starts to copy itself. And so why do we do this? Why do we have these flags? Why do we need to be segregated and to compete against one another? And therefore there's conflict, there are wars and all sorts of things. Why does it have to be like that? And more importantly, it must have worked, because if not, we should have killed ourselves by now. So why are we still here? Why are we thriving? Because we have been. I mean, look at the history of mankind. How have we got here? We have got, for a very long time, the progress was very, very slow. For thousands of years, from the time that we discovered agriculture to sort of, the 15th, 16th century, the time of Renaissance, not much happened. But look at what happened after that. So this is the problem, and we'll discuss it in the future video. Cancer is gravity, and the will to power works, because the will to power, where everybody wants to be in charge of making decision, it actually works. And this is, again, like I said, he is indispensable, because you can't argue with him. The results, although the process of evolution, as you can quite clearly see, is that it's symbiosis, but it looks as if we can't really do symbiosis without first ripping each other to pieces, which is the irresistible way of complexation, banging things together. So we haven't really quite woken up yet. But anyway, speciation and racism works. It works to a certain extent. It shouldn't work if we can replace it, but if we can't replace it, then doing nothing is infinitely worse than having speciation and racism. And both of these we'll discuss in the next video, because human speciation is very real, whether racism is just a choice. Anyway, if you need a more complete and systematic explanation of the point raised here, then please get this book. It's free of charge as Kindle ebook. I don't want anything from you. And my main concern here is that we need to re-examine our lives, because as Socrates says, if we don't re-examine it, we're living the lives of accelerated animals, which, if you look at the evidence at this moment in time, that is precisely what we're doing. We're focused on technology. We don't care about anything else, just more, and faster and faster and faster, and that's the only consideration. So especially the education system, in my opinion, is terrible. It'd be better not to have it than have this toxic, malignant education system that produces elitism and produces the very people who are the most educated, who are then become the most powerful, and in turn cause the most damage. How is that an education system? That's madness. Anyway, thanks.